It's official. Hockey is back. I hope you all had a fantastic new year. 2020 sucked. Let's be real. 2020 was miserable. It was awful. It was no good. So many bad things happened in the city of Boston in 2020. And the Bruins, well, they were just a little bit of the problem. Because at the end of the 2020 season, Boston was doing really, really well. Also taking really big advantage of that extra point for losing in overtime and the shootout. They didn't win a shootout, they might have won one overtime. I gotta double check the record. They did not win a single shootout all season last year, but that's neither here nor there. By early March, the season gets canceled. Not canceled, but suspended and put on hold. And we end up with a bubble scenario down around July, August, where the Bruins were in Toronto in the playoffs, and they ran into the buzzsaw yet again. That is the Tampa Bay Lightning. But it's time to look ahead and 2021, because hockey begins. It is officially the first day of training camp, hopefully by the time I produce this. If not, it is the second day of training camp, and the Bruins will have their home opener, or their season opener anyway, in roughly 10 days. If not, depending on when this comes out, 11 days. So, let's take a look at some of the key additions. By that, I mean 1. Craig Smith, right winger, formerly of the Nashville Predators. He can put the puck in the net a little bit. 20-goal scorer, usually right about that point. I don't know what that means for the shortened 2020 season. We'll break that down in a minute. We also got the key departures, which are most important, especially if you like defense or offensive defensemen, because the Boston Bruins have lost Zdeno Chara to free agency. He is now a member of the Washington Capitals, and the Boston Bruins, more importantly, lost their best offensive defenseman, the leader of their top power play unit, Torey, Krug, goes to the St. Louis Blues. Just twist that dagger in right there. So last season, in 61 games with the Boston Bruins on the regular season, Torey Krug, 9 goals, 40 assists for 49 points. He was 4th on the team in points scored in the season. In 523 games as a Boston Bruin, all of his games with the Boston Bruins, 337 points, 67 goals, 270 assists. That's Torey Krug in a nutshell. Really, really good offensive producer. You get what you get on the back end, but you don't really expect, defensive production from a guy like Torey Krug. You expect defensive production from a guy like Zdeno Chara, who, even as the rumors have it, he was supposed to have potentially a limited role, or that's what they were going to give him. He said, you don't know if I want that. And so Boston will be, for the first time, captainless, or moving on to a different person, different captain for the first time since the 2006-2007 season. And also, since that season, Zdeno Chara has been the number 1 left shot defenseman for the Boston Bruins. That's a long time. That's a lot to make up. No, let's also not kind of take away from the fact that the Bruins have lost a left shot forward, a big part of their 4th line on and off, in Joakim Nordstrom. He's gone off to Calgary. So, let's take a look at the way the season's going to work. It is a whole brand new division, and lucky us, we get the one that's the toughest of the bunch. 56 games, that's going to mean that you play every team in your division, at least for Boston, 8 different times. And in this Eastern Division, you got the likes of the Buffalo Sabres, the New Jersey Devils, the New York Islanders, the New York Rangers, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and of course, the Washington Capitals. A murderer's row of the Metro Division. Just, of course, why not? As I said, last season, the Boston Bruins finished 44 wins, 14 losses, and 12 assists. In 70 games, they were the first team and the only team to get to the 100-point mark. That gave them the President's Trophy, which is notoriously horrible if you go to the playoffs. In 10 postseason games, the Boston Bruins had 5 wins, 5 losses, eliminated in the second round by the Tampa Bay Lightning. They beat in the first round the Carolina Hurricanes, who are not in the East. They are, I believe, in the Central Division. Weird, whole different weirdness. You get your all-Canadian North Division, the West Division, which is by far the easiest. Congratulations, Colorado, on winning the West Division right off the bat before you even drop the puck. But that's beside the point. With the new season, we need to look at a couple of notable dates for the NHL, and that is the trade deadline happening April 12th at 3 p.m. I will get to why a little bit later on when we talk about the team in general. The Seattle Kraken expansion draft, which I am not going to touch at this point. Anything with Seattle, but that happens on the 21st of July. The NHL draft is on the 23rd of July, and free agency begins at 12 o'clock on the 28th of July. Those are just some of the fun dates that we get according to the season. So let us get a little bit more in detail of the season and how it works. So each team allowed a 23-man roster. 36 skaters are allowed in training camp, which we are at right now. Unlimited goaltenders in your training camp, but eventually, as expected, you will begin to cut people. So you start at 36 skaters with goaltenders, and you drop that down to 23 as you would. Unfortunately, it gives every team about 11 to 10 days to figure out who is going to be on their roster. So, yeah, it's going to be a stressful time for a lot of people. But there is this whole new scenario, given the pandemic and everything going on in the world, where the NHL has come up with this idea of a taxi squad, which is 4 to 6 healthy skaters may travel with the team. It's not required. They may practice with the team. Not required. So it's not set in stone. They can move people onto the taxi squad. They can move them off the taxi squad. They can send them to Providence, keep them on the taxi squad. Doesn't affect the waivers because they are treated as AHL players. Now, also, those players do not affect the NHL salary cap because, again, they're considered minor league players. Waiver rules do apply, of course. Also, on the taxi squad, if you do not have 3 goalies in your starting lineup, in your roster, you must have a goaltender as part of your taxi squad. And this is mainly to allow immediate to quick NHL call-ups in case of injury, in case of anything that comes out. So the Boston Bruins have released their training camp roster, which is right here, and pretty much just no different. Nobody you wouldn't expect to see on that roster, on that training camp list. But now the fun part is who makes this team. And I know David Pastrnak, of course, is more likely than not going to start the year on injured reserve. We'll get to that in a second. Kevin Miller is iffy if he's going to start the year, if he's going to play. Is he healthy? I don't know. I don't know why they signed him for $1 million. They could have used that on Zdeno Chara. Anyway. Also, it is anticipated that Brad Marchand will be available and will start day one. He was actually on ice today in the first day of training camp. He was wearing the non-contact jersey, but that's neither here nor there. So, let's go through this roster, and I'll be as brief as possible. A lot of the names are people you expect to be on the team. Krejci, Bergeron, Charlie Coyle, Jake DeBrusk, Craig Smith, Andre Kasha, Anders Bjork, Chris Wagner, Sean Corrali, Per Lindholm, Brad Marchand, Tuukka Rask, Yaroslav Halak, Charlie McAvoy, Matty Grzelcyk, Brendan Carlo, Connor Clifton, Johnny Moore, Jeremy Lauzon, Jack Studnicka, and more likely than not, Nick Ritchie's back. Yay. Now, the fun and interesting thing becomes the idea of the taxi squad. Because if you haven't noticed, no Chara and no Krug means there's a big hole on the left side defense for the Boston Bruins that they kind of have only 10 days to figure out, although it's very likely with a flat cap, Teams are not going to be picking up waivers very, very easily, although this is extremely, extremely risky if the Boston Bruins decide to do this, where they could play around and play musical left defensemen using the taxi squad, specifically with Zaboral, but more importantly, Urho Vakanainen should be on the taxi squad. Mandatory goalie is going to be Swayman or Dan Vladar. Pick one. A lot of people say Swayman is the better goalie. Vladar, of course, got thrown to the Wolves against the Tampa Bay Lightning in the playoffs, and also was the backup for Yaroslav Halak for the majority of the playoffs once Tuukka Rask went to home and took care of his family. So, other possible names for the taxi squad: Greg McKegg, who Boston did pick up in free agency. Don't know much about him. Depth forward, taxi squads it is. Steven Kampfer, more likely than not, will hit the taxi squad. Trent Frederick will also probably be a part of the taxi squad, but could make the team, could be part of the fourth line on the left. We'll get to the roster and kind of the lineup as I see it in a minute. But, as I mentioned, April 12th, the trade deadline is at 3 o'clock. I am anticipating, unfortunately, given the toughness of the division, the fact that they are without arguably their best offensive defenseman and also their best shutdown power play guy that they've seen in the last 13 years, this team might be sellers. I hate to break it, but it's more likely than not that the Boston Bruins will be selling at the trade deadline, and they have some good names to throw around. Probably the one that's going to be the best is going to be Yaroslav Halak with a $2.25 million cap hit. Very, very small cap hit for a very good A1, A2 kind of goaltender that you can get as a rental. I mean, you could see them try to move David Krejci, but with his mandatory non-trade clause and the fact that he's a $7.25 million cap hit in a flat cap is very, very unlikely. Same goes with Tuukka Rask, who's only going to be here for one more year. Whether or not this is his last year remains to be seen. We'll figure that out as we get along. Maybe a small move. You might see them move Per Lindholm as a depth centerman. But again, that potentially something that could happen along the way. So as mentioned, Brad Marchand is skating. He is on the team right now as part of their training camp. He was out with a sports hernia surgery. That surgery happened, of course, September 14th. Given the 4-month recovery time, it is still very likely that he is going to be able to make the Game 1 start on the 14th of January. According to Ty Anderson, and many people would know, David Pastrnak, the star, best scorer on this team, he's out with a right hip arthroscopy and a labral repair. That's a 5-month recovery from that surgery, which occurred on the 16th of September. That kind of puts him a month out of the Game 1 start time. Realistically, I don't even know if he's going to be ready to go mid-February. I don't know if you see Pastrnak until maybe even March. At the earliest, maybe late February. Is he going to be even ready to go with all the people playing every game against a division where everything matters? Every point, every game is 2 points for you, no points for other teams in your division. So a lot of people are going to be just clashing and banging, and I don't know if Pastrnak will be ready at that level that he needs to be at when he comes off surgery. So, with that being said, and Pastrnak being on the injured reserve, we're going to take a look at my projected lineup, which is always the fun part, and how much I can be wrong. So, we're going to start with the first line, and naturally, most of this is probably going to be familiar to you. Brad Marchand starting on the left, with Patrice Bergeron at center, and for at least maybe starting right now, but again, this could very well change. Craig Smith playing on the right wing, with the second line naturally being Jake DeBrusk and centered by David Krejci. Probably more likely than not, you're going to see Andre Kasha on that right wing for that line. They gelled a lot in the postseason. They really started to get going. Line 3 is kind of the interesting one, because I figured this out. I thought of this as their best line that they played against the Tampa Bay Lightning. It might have just been a matchup thing. Anders Bjork, Charlie Coyle, and Jack Studnicka. I thought this was a great lineup. Naturally, Bjork and Ritchie could flip-flop in and out. You could even see a rotating right winger where Studnicka moves up to the first line, moves up to the second line, Kasha and Smith. You can see a jumbling at the right wing position. But the one consistent thing I see is this fourth line with Per Lindholm, Sean Kuraly, and Chris Wagner. On defense, the big question, who is the left defenseman? More likely than not, Matty Grzelcyk and Charlie McAvoy will probably start because they have the most chemistry, being that they were a defensive pair at Boston University. Although you could see John Moore or Jeremy Lauzon at that top D1 position. Naturally, the right side is fairly easy to determine. McAvoy, Carlo, Clifton, or Kevin Miller if healthy. Moore, Lauzon, and Matty Grzelcyk, of course, are going to be your probable starting 3 left defensemen, although you could definitely see Urho Vakanainen getting in there, etc., etc. And your goaltenders. The goaltenders, by God, they are the easiest to determine. It's Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak. That's it. Thank God. Consistency at goaltending. It might be helpful. Although for a good while, you are going to see a revolving door at a couple of positions, especially until Pastrnak returns. Now, once Pastrnak returns, is Studnicka out of the lineup? Kasha, does he move down to third? Does Smith move down to the third line? Nobody knows. We'll see how that works out a month down the road. Given this division that has Washington, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, the Islanders are a good team. Philadelphia is the best team in the bunch. Pittsburgh's still around. Washington is still as good as they always are. Buffalo could be something. We don't know. They have, Taylor Hall now. But given the brutal toughness of this division and the question marks that the Bruins have for secondary scoring, especially with Torey Krug out, a lot of their second, third, and fourth lines have to start really upping up their secondary scoring. And God knows, how is this left side defense going to sort itself out? It's been consistent for so long with Krug and Chara. We don't know what Urho Vakanainen is. We don't know what Jeremy Lauzon is as a left defenseman. We don't know what we have in John Moore. He has barely played at least any memorable minutes since becoming a part of the Boston Bruins. He's pretty much been spending most of his time up on the 12th floor. So, the problem is I strongly foresee the Boston Bruins missing the playoffs, given the format, given the division, and the lack of really bad teams that they can normally abuse. There's no Ottawa this year. There's no Florida Panthers to abuse. You're not playing teams outside of your division. So you don't get those, extra 1 point where it's a 1 point for you, 1 point for the other team, but the other team's not in your division, so it helps you out. There's none of those. So it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a struggle. It's a tough division. And do not be surprised if the Boston Bruins cannot and will not make the playoffs in 2021. I wish I had better news, but enjoy the ride. Hockey is back. We'll see you on the 14th for the first game against the New Jersey Devils. This is the Bruins Recap Show. Please tell me how much I'm wrong in the comments, as well as like, share, give this video a thumbs up if you shall, if you liked it, and subscribe and all that fun stuff. We'll see you next time on the Bruins Recap Show.